If you just opened this video, pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. It's no coincidence that you're here right now. Today, I need to tell you something that God placed in my heart with an urgency I've never felt before. The title isn't an exaggeration. It's not sensationalism. And I'm not here to scare anyone. I'm here because God spoke to me clearly. Something worse than COVID is coming in 2026. And when He speaks, I obey. Before continuing, write in the comments. Where are you watching from? I want to pray for your life and your family. This message isn't just information, it's preparation. And what He showed me wasn't light. I saw things that moved me, things that made me stop everything and ask, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? And the answer was simple and direct. Warn, prepare, awaken. My name is Raphael, and what I'm about to share happened while I was praying alone in my room, seeking guidance to understand what God wanted to show me about the coming years. I wasn't expecting any visions or looking for anything extraordinary, but I felt in my heart that I needed to be silent for a few minutes and just listen. It was at that moment that I perceived a different clarity, as if my thoughts were being interrupted by something greater than myself. The impression was that God wanted to warn me about something serious, something that could affect millions of people worldwide. I took a deep breath, kept my eyes closed, and let Him guide me. That's when it all began. The first phrase that came to my heart was, "Pay attention." That's what changed the course of that simple prayer. At that moment, God showed me something about a new pandemic, unlike anything we had ever seen. I saw people locked in their homes, not because someone ordered them to, but because they themselves were afraid to go out. The feeling was that the whole world was paralyzed, as if each closed door was a sign of despair. What struck me was that, unlike COVID, where many even disobeyed the rules, in this vision nobody wanted to take the risk. The virus attacked several organs at the same time, weakening people quickly, and this created a silent panic. The scene was heavy and sad to see. Everything seemed still. The streets, the houses, the buildings. It was as if the world had held its breath, waiting for a miracle. Another thing I noticed in the vision was that, even with all this fear, people were trying to communicate using the internet, telephone, and apps. But in many places, none of that worked. God showed me entire regions without maintenance, because nobody dared to go out to work. It was as if the world had shut down. I felt a tightness in my chest when I saw families trying to talk to relatives and not being able to. It was that mixture of distress and helplessness that hurts just to remember. And at the same time, I realized that this wasn't being shown to make me despair, but to help me understand the gravity of what was being revealed. The communication failures showed how isolated people were and how unprepared the world was for something so big. The part that weighed most heavily on me was when God showed me the food shortage. I saw empty shelves and trucks stopped because the supply chain had been completely disrupted. It was as if everything had frozen at once. People weren't leaving their homes, and those who worked in transportation didn't dare go out on the street. The feeling was that fear had taken over everything, and families were trying to survive with the little they had saved. It wasn't a scene of noisy chaos, but of profound silence. That kind of silence that speaks louder than any scream. And while I saw all this, the only thing I thought was, God, what do you want me to do with this? It was then that God spoke to my heart, something that gave me strength. This is the enemy's plan, but I reveal it so that you may pray and prepare yourselves. I understood that the goal was not to cause panic, but to awaken vigilance. God made it clear that this scenario was not definitive, and that He gives strength to overcome difficult times. I felt within me a deep conviction that those who have gone through COVID can face anything when they are with God, not because of human courage, but because He sustains them. The vision showed a huge problem, but the message that God placed within me was greater than the problem. He said that his people would overcome, and I began to realize that this was a call to prayer and spiritual resilience. I finished that prayer trembling inside, but not from fear. It was a mixture of concern and purpose. I knew that vision wasn't meant for me to keep to myself. God made it clear that He exposes the enemy's plan so that His people pray before things happen. I felt I needed to tell, I needed to warn, I needed to prepare those who were willing to listen. What God showed wasn't to create panic in the world, but to strengthen those who believe. He reminded me that no plan of the enemy is greater than His power, and that those who are firm in Christ need not fear any future. The revelation ended, but the responsibility began there. And I understood. God was trusting me to warn, prepare, and strengthen other people. After that vision, I spent a few days trying to process everything that had happened. I would wake up thinking about the scenes and go to sleep, remembering that heavy silence I saw in the whole world. It was as if God was preparing me to understand that it wasn't just an impression, but a real warning. At various times, I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe it was just exaggerated worry. But every time I tried to put it aside, something inside me pulled me back. It was as if God was repeating, "I showed you so you wouldn't ignore it." Then I started praying again, this time asking for confirmation. And that's when more details began to form in my mind. Details that I hadn't fully noticed at first. One of the things that struck me most was realizing that, despite the gravity of the situation, God didn't show uncontrolled chaos. What He showed me was a silent, almost motionless world, as if everything were paralyzed by fear. And this made me understand that the enemy always works with panic and isolation. I saw people wanting to talk to their families and not being able to. I saw connections dropping. I saw entire systems failing due to lack of maintenance. The scenario didn't just show a virus, but the collapse of something bigger, the structure that sustained communication between people. This made me think about how much the world depends on the basics, and how the basics can be broken when no one is prepared to face something so intense. As I continued praying, God reminded me that pandemics don't come from Him. He allows us to see the enemy's plan so we can pray before it happens. This part resonated with me because I had never seen it that way. The vision wasn't a sentence, but a revelation. It was God showing, "This is what they are planning, but you can resist." I felt that God wanted to awaken people not to fear, but to a different spiritual posture. He wanted His people to understand that prayer isn't just about asking, but about fighting. This understanding changed the way I looked at the vision. I stopped asking, "Why?" and started asking, "For what purpose?" And the answer was simple: to prepare. God also reminded me that those who walked with Him during COVID learned to deal with uncertainty. He brought to my heart the certainty that no one who trusts in Him is alone. I felt a new strength when He said within me, "You are not a victim. You are a victor." Those words echoed within me for hours. And at that moment, I realized that God wasn't showing me the vision to break me, but to strengthen me. The vision was harsh, but the message was firm. With Him, we overcome anything. This brought a kind of courage that I can't explain. A silent but constant courage that helped me breathe deeper and keep my eyes fixed on God. From that day on, I began to realize that God wasn't just warning about a new pandemic. He was talking about something bigger, a time of spiritual preparation. He showed me that there will be a great awakening in the midst of this affliction. People who never sought God will begin to seek Him. People who have drifted away will return. He spoke to my heart that the coming time will be marked by spiritual authority, by healing, by profound transformation. This brought me hope, because while the vision showed fear and isolation, God's message showed renewal and growth. It's as if He were saying, darkness may try to advance, but the light will shine brighter. When I realized all of this, I understood that God was opening a window of preparation, of strengthening, and of vigilance. He was calling his church to rise up, not with despair, but with discernment. He was showing that what is coming cannot be faced with distraction, but with spiritual firmness. This became very clear to me, so I decided that I would not remain silent. If God showed me, it's because someone needed to hear, and if someone needed to hear, I had to speak. This conviction took hold of me, and on that day I realized that witnessing was no longer a choice. It was a responsibility. God was showing me what was to come so that I could help others prepare. In the following days, I felt that God wanted to show me something deeper about that vision. It wasn't just about the virus or people's fear, but about the spiritual impact of this time. When I prayed again, I realized that God was reminding me how much the enemy tries to use crises to paralyze not only the physical body, but also faith. The vision showed people afraid to open the door, but what God made me understand is that the greatest attack was not against their movement, but against their hearts. It was as if the enemy was trying to plant a collective discouragement, a feeling of abandonment. And at that moment, God made me see that the battle would be much greater than just a matter of health. That's when he started talking to me about resilience, not that tired, human resilience, but a spiritual resilience that only arises when a person understands who is by their side. I felt God reminding me that, during COVID, many people discovered strength in places they never imagined. And he said within me, whoever overcame that, overcomes whatever comes. This wasn't spiritual arrogance, it was trust in him. The vision showed the enemy trying to instill mass fear, but God said that his children would not live as victims. He said it would be a time to lift our heads, to remember that when he is near, nothing is greater than his presence. This certainty began to create a different weight within me. As I reflected, the vision returned to my mind for a few seconds. I saw again the empty streets, the closed shops, the silence. But this time, God showed me something behind this scene. A spiritual breakthrough happening invisibly, people kneeling in their homes, families praying together for the first time in years, men who had never sought God raising their hands and asking for help. It was as if God was preparing a great awakening, a silent change that would happen in the midst of the crisis. That moment touched me deeply because I realized that even in the midst of affliction, God was planning something greater, something that the natural world would not immediately see. God began speaking to me about healing, not just physical healing, but emotional and spiritual healing. He said he would raise up people with authority to pray for the sick, to comfort families, to help those who were losing hope. I felt such strong compassion at that moment that I needed to stop praying and just breathe. I understood that God wasn't just showing me a problem, but revealing that he himself would provide and use his power. He said that his anointing would manifest itself even more clearly, and that many testimonies would emerge from this difficult phase. The image was harsh, but the purpose was clear. God would not leave his people helpless. Another thing God brought to my heart was that this time would mark a very strong spiritual breakthrough. He spoke of yokes being broken, of people being freed from old fears, of faith being restored in homes where there was previously spiritual coldness. I felt as if he was opening my understanding to see that the enemy could try to stop me, but he would never win. With each word, I felt more certain that this vision was not about destruction, but about preparation. God was showing that when an attack comes, he already has the spiritual counterattack prepared. And this brought me a peace that didn't make human sense, but that filled my heart with conviction. After that understanding, something changed within me. It was no longer just a vision I had seen. It was a mission God had placed in my hands. He showed me the problem, but he also showed me the solution. He revealed the darkness, but he also showed me the light. and the light always wins. From that moment on, I understood that I needed to continue paying attention to every detail God revealed, because this wasn't about me. It was about preparing people to stand firm. It was about reminding God's people that He hadn't lost control of anything. And on that day, for the first time, I realized that the vision was only the beginning. God still had much more to reveal. Before continuing with what God has shown me, I want to make a simple request to you who are here with me. Comment below. Where are you watching from? This video. It could be your city, your state, your country. I really want to know how far this message is reaching, because today I'm going to set aside time to pray for each person who writes in the comments. It doesn't matter if you're watching this from Brazil, Portugal, the United States, or anywhere else in the world. Put the name of your place there. I pray for your home, your health, and your family. And I also pray that God gives you discernment to understand each part of this revelation. Now that I know you're with me, I can tell you what came after that initial vision. After that powerful moment of prayer, God showed me something that deeply affected me. The vision returned, but this time He made me pay attention to people's emotions. It wasn't just the fear of leaving home. It was the fear of no longer having control over anything. People who had always been strong were weakened. People who had always been secure were disoriented. And God showed me this not to condemn anyone, but to reveal that people's hearts would be the main target of this next battle. It wouldn't just be a physical attack, but an emotional and spiritual one. The enemy wanted to use the feeling of abandonment to break down faith. But at that very moment, God told me that He would be raising up strong people to support those who were falling. As I watched everything, God showed me groups of people praying in their own homes. Some prayed alone, others with their families, others even online when it still worked. And this part touched me deeply. It was as if, amidst the fear, a spiritual fire began to ignite in various places around the world at the same time. It wasn't an organized movement. It wasn't an event. It wasn't a church campaign. It was something spontaneous, born in simple homes, in ordinary neighborhoods, in places no one would imagine. And God made me understand that this awakening would be one of the greatest in history. Where fear tried to enter, He would place faith. Where loneliness tried to dominate, He would place His presence. This gave me hope. The vision then shifted to a scene of healing. God showed me people praying for the sick in their homes, laying hands on others with simple faith, without technique, without formula, just trusting. And He showed that many would be healed in this way. I saw people regaining strength, families witnessing miracles, neighbors seeking help from one another. And God explained to me in my heart that, even in the face of such a serious pandemic, He would not let His anointing disappear. On the contrary, He would pour out healing exactly where the enemy tried to bring death. This part moved me, because I realized that God was showing that He is still in control of everything. Nothing escapes His reach, not even times of crisis. God also showed me spiritual leaders being raised up unexpectedly. Simple people who never imagined preaching or teaching would be used with authority. God spoke within me that it would not be a time of titles, but of purpose. He showed men and women filled with courage to help their neighbors, their friends, their families. I saw people sharing food, sharing the word, sharing comfort. I saw homes restored in the midst of the storm. I saw faith being reborn in those who had already given up on everything. And God told me, I am preparing a strong people. And this echoed in my mind for hours, bringing a certainty that the vision did not end in pain. It pointed to restoration. When the vision for this chapter ended, I stood still for a few minutes, taking a deep breath. It wasn't a burden, it was a responsibility. It was as if God was saying, I showed you this to reach people. That's why I asked you to comment on where you're watching from. I want to pray for you because I know that every detail God revealed has a purpose. He showed me the attack, but He also showed me the response. He showed me the fear, but He also showed me the victory. He showed me the darkness, but he also showed me the light that would come next. And when I realized that, I understood that all I needed to do was obey and continue sharing what he revealed to me. There was still much more to be shown, and I was ready to continue. When I finished seeing all that, I could only remain silent for a few minutes. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. Awareness that what God showed wasn't meant to create panic, but to awaken. He made it clear to me that none of this is definitive, that none of this takes him by surprise, and that everything the enemy plans is revealed beforehand so that God's people can prepare. What I saw about the coming pandemic was serious, it was heavy, but what I heard from God was even greater. My people will overcome. And that's what I want you to take away from this video. You are not alone, and you will not face anything alone. God is already ahead, preparing, protecting, strengthening. He always does this. Always. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? I want to pray for your life, your family, and your health. I truly pray for every comment, and I do so responsibly before God. Now, keep this in your heart. Prepare your spirit, strengthen your faith, remain vigilant, not to live in fear, but to live consciously. God will sustain you every step of the way. May His peace be upon you and your household. Stay strong. There's still a lot ahead, but God is already there before you arrive.